helicopter's blades carved through the thin, cold air of the Grand Tetons, a mechanical heartbeat pulsing against the vast silence of the Wyoming wilderness. Matthew Anderson, a man hollowed by the slow bleed of a failed marriage, pressed his forehead to the window, his breath fogging the glass in fleeting clouds. Below, pine forests unfurled like a dark, endless tapestry, their needle-sharp tips piercing the horizon, broken only by jagged granite outcrops and distant meadows where wildflowers bled crimson against the green. The chopper banked over a final ridge, revealing Copper Mountain Fire Lookout, a solitary wooden tower perched on a rocky spur, its weathered planks stark against the forest sprawl. It stood alone, a forgotten sentinel in a game too vast for human comprehension, its isolation a beacon to Matthew's wounded soul. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset, dry as the October wind. Copper Mountain on your right, pretty spot, isolated as hell. Isolation was the cure he sought. 3 weeks earlier, in a sterile Seattle lawyer's office, Matthew had signed divorce papers, the pen scratch sealing the end of a life that had crumbled like ash. The city had become a labyrinth of ghosts. Restaurants once shared with Amy now forbidden, friends fumbling through divided loyalties, an apartment echoing with the absence of her laughter. Each corner held a memory that stung, each familiar street a reminder of failure. He craved a place where silence could smother the past, where solitude might mend the frayed threads of his being. Copper Mountain, remote and unforgiving, promised that respite. The helicopter descended, its downdraft whipping pine needles into chaotic spirals, a miniature maelstrom in the clearing 50 yards from the tower. "Help me unload," the pilot said, cutting the engine. His voice clipped with the urgency of an approaching storm. "Got a front moving in tonight. Need to beat it back to Jackson." Matthew shouldered canvas supply bags, their weight grounding him, the coarse fabric rough against his palms. Canned goods, batteries, and gear pressed against his back, while the pilot hauled plastic food containers, their contents rattling softly. The Forest Service had been explicit in their briefing. No running water save for what rain the barrel caught, a propane stove for cooking, solar panels for meager electricity, and an outhouse 20 steps from the tower's base, its wooden door warped by years of mountain weather. The tower loomed 40 feet above, a skeletal structure of weathered pine, its zigzag steps creaking under Matthew's boots. Each step resounded with a hollow thud, a metronome marking his descent into exile. Below, the forest stretched unbroken, a sea of pines swaying in the breeze, their shadows pooling like ink across rocky patches and distant meadows. No roads cut through the wilderness, no cabins dotted the horizon, no trace of humanity marred the view. The pilot handed him a sealed envelope, instructions inside, and departed with a curt nod, his businesslike efficiency a stark contrast to the mountain's indifference. As the helicopter's roar faded beyond the ridge, silence crashed in, sudden and absolute, a shroud that wrapped Matthew's senses in its cold, unyielding grip. The cabin, a 15-foot square, was a study in austerity, its simplicity a mirror to its precarious existence. Windows lined all 4 walls, their glass streaked with dust and decades of rain, offering a 360-degree vigil over the forest's expanse. The view was a paradox, beautiful in its vastness, oppressive in its isolation, each ridge and valley a reminder of Matthew's solitude. A desk hugged 3 walls, its surface scarred by past lookouts, cluttered with topographic maps whose grid lines traced the wilderness like veins. A pair of high-powered binoculars rested on a swivel mount, their lenses glinting faintly, while a Forest Service radio sat coiled with its antenna, a lifeline to a world Matthew had fled. In one corner, a propane stove and a solar-powered mini-fridge formed a makeshift kitchen, the fridge humming faintly when the sun obliged. A cot with a thin, sagging mattress occupied the 4th corner, beside a bookshelf bowed under the weight of field guides, a tattered copy of Moby Dick, and a battery-powered radio that crackled with static on clear nights. Matthew unpacked with deliberate care, as if ritual could anchor him to this new life. He stowed clothes in a single dresser, its drawers sticking with age, and arranged his meager possessions. A journal, a pen, a handful of books, Thoreau's Walden for irony, a field guide to Wyoming flora for practicality. A framed photo of his parents, their smiles frozen in a sunlit moment from years past, gave him pause. He traced the frame's edge, then placed it face down in a drawer, unwilling to let even that fragment of the past intrude. Nothing from his marriage had followed him here. No rings, no letters, no echoes of Amy's voice. At 1800 hours, the radio crackled to life, its static a jolt in the cabin's stillness. Copper Mountain Lookout, this is Bridger Teton Base. Commune. Matthew gripped the receiver, his voice steady despite the weight in his chest. This is Copper Mountain Lookout, Matthew Anderson reporting. Robert, the base operator, welcomed him with a gruff warmth, his voice carrying the weariness of a man who'd seen too many seasons. He outlined protocol with military precision. Check-ins at 0800 and 1800 hours. Immediate smoke reports using map coordinates. Emergencies on Channel 2, repeated thrice. Your primary zone's 20,000 acres, Robert added. But on clear days, you'll spot smoke 50 miles out. Maps in your desk have it all marked. You're our eyes up there, Anderson. That night, a storm swept in. Rain hammering the windows like 1,000 tiny fists. Thunder rolling through the valleys with a god's displeasure. Matthew lay on his cot, the thin mattress creaking beneath him, the chaos outside a strange comfort. Nature's fury dwarfed his personal failures, its indifference a balm to a heart bruised by human betrayal. He drifted to sleep, lulled by the storm's relentless cadence, unaware that the silence waiting beyond it held a hunger older than the mountains themselves. The first week passed in a blur of routine, each day a scaffold Matthew built to hold his fractured self together. Dawn found him at the windows, binoculars sweeping the horizon in a slow, methodical 360-degree arc, searching for the telltale curl of smoke that could spell disaster. The Forest Service maps, spread across the desk like sacred texts, became his scripture, their gridlines and landmarks. Cathedral Rock's jagged spire to the north, Blackwater Creek's sinuous path east, Dead Man's Ridge's somber bulk southwest, anchoring him to purpose. 4 times daily, he logged weather data. Temperature, wind direction, humidity, each variable a potential spark for a forest inferno. The act of recording, pen scratching paper, numbers aligning in neat rows, offered a clarity he hadn't known since Seattle's suffocating days. Between observations, he hiked nearby trails, never straying more than an hour from the tower, the crunch of pine needles underfoot a grounding rhythm. The forest was alive with detail, sunlight filtering through canopies, casting dappled patterns on moss, the sharp scent of resin, the fleeting glimpse of a mule deer vanishing into underbrush. These moments, small and unremarkable, stitched together the frayed edges of his soul. Solitude, initially a refuge, became therapy. No emails demanded answers, no texts carried pity, no friends asked how he was holding up. The forest's nighttime chorus, coyotes yipping in the distance, owls hooting from unseen perches, small creatures rustling through undergrowth, erased the city's ghosts. Matthew sat on the tower's narrow porch, a weathered plank barely wide enough for a chair, letting darkness dissolve everything but the present. On the 8th day, while reorganizing the desk's cluttered drawers, he found them. A stack of logbooks, their pages yellowed and curling, each a testament to the lookouts who'd come before. Some were clinical, their entries a monotonous litany of clear skies, no smoke, as if the writer feared embellishment. Others brimmed with life. Sketches of wildflowers, notes on elk migrations, confessions of loneliness that stung with familiarity. One logbook, labeled Wilson, Season 2022, stood apart, its pages only half filled, as if abandoned mid-thought. Matthew opened it, drawn to the neat, measured handwriting of David Wilson, a man who'd watched the same forest 2 summers prior. May 12, 2022. David Wilson reporting for 2nd season at Copper Mountain Lookout. Clear conditions, light southerly winds. Spotted elk herd in eastern meadow. No smoke. David's entries were meticulous, cataloging weather patterns, bird migrations, and fungal growths with a biologist's rigor. Matthew read on, a strange kinship forming with this unseen predecessor, as if the tower itself whispered of shared burdens. But as he turned the pages, the tone shifted. By July, David's observations grew uneasy. July 14, 2022. Birdsong stopped at 1,432 hours. Silence fell over NW quadrant for 27 minutes. No visual cause identified. The precision of the timing, 27 minutes, suggested a man counting seconds, his unease palpable. August brought personal asides, cracks in David's scientific facade. August 3, 2022. Something wrong below North Ridge. No wildlife movement. Third consecutive day. The absence is noticeable, like a void that shouldn't exist. September's entries darkened further. September 8, 2022. Saw it at Forest Edge, directly north of Tower. Tall, thin outline, too tall for human proportions. Stayed still for 7 minutes before retreating into trees. David described multiple figures, their movements jerky, like film running at the wrong speed, and a voice mimicking his dead sister Mary, calling his name in the night. The final page, dated October 15, 2022, was a frantic scrawl, the pen tearing the paper in places. It's outside. It wants in. They're not human anymore. Never were. The Wendigo gets inside you, changes you, makes you hungry. Leave now. Matthew closed the book, a chill seeping into his bones, as if the tower's walls had exhaled a warning. Isolation could fracture a mind. He'd felt it in Seattle, hearing Amy's keys in a door that never opened, her voice calling from an empty hallway. But David's words carried a weight beyond madness. Their specificity, a hook that snagged Matthew's rational mind. The radio's crackle startled him. Copper Mountain, evening check-in. He reported to Robert, his voice mechanical, but David's logbook lingered in his thoughts like a shadow. After the call, he reopened it, tracing David's descent from scientist to haunted man. The early entries mirrored his own, methodical, grounded, but the later ones spoke of a forest turning hostile, its silence a predator's crouch. Matthew dismissed it as paranoia, yet the forest's nighttime sounds seemed sharper now, the pauses between them pregnant with intent. 2 weeks into his watch, Matthew woke at 2:17 a.m., heart pounding in the darkness. A sound had pierced his sleep, a wolf howl that warped mid-cry, stretching into a wail that was almost human, a keening note that clawed at the edges of reason. It wasn't the mournful call of a lone wolf, but something broken, as if the animal's throat had twisted into a mockery of speech. He stumbled to the north window, moonlight silvering the forest's edge, the sound circling the tower, northeast, then northwest, as if pacing with deliberate intent. For an hour, it moved, never revealing its source, its pitch shifting from animal to something that grated against the soul. At 3:17 a.m., it stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that pressed against his eardrums like a physical weight, heavy and unnatural. Matthew stood frozen, breath fogging the glass, his reflection a pale ghost in the window. He tried to rationalize it. An injured wolf, perhaps its vocal cords damaged, but the explanation felt hollow, a lie told to calm a racing heart. In his official log, he wrote, 0217 hours. Unusual animal vocalization, NE quadrant. Possible injured wolf. Will report if heard again. The words, neat and clinical, betrayed none of the unease that gnawed at him. He returned to his cot, but sleep eluded him, the silence outside now a presence, watching, waiting. 3 nights later, the howl returned, closer, its vibrations thrumming through the tower's planks like a pulse. Matthew grabbed his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, and caught a pair of amber eyes at the tree line, glowing 6 feet off the ground. Too high for a wolf, too steady for a bear. They held his gaze, unblinking, before vanishing when he fumbled for the spotlight. By the time its stronger beam swept the forest, the eyes were gone, leaving only the rustle of pines in the breeze. The forest grew quieter each day. Squirrels, once bold enough to chatter at his approach, vanished. Birdsong, a constant companion, thinned to a few distant calls. Insects, whose hum had filled summer evenings, fell silent, their absence a void that pressed against Matthew's senses. His hikes, once a source of solace, felt exposed, the forest's gaze heavy on his back. He kept his knife close, its weight a small comfort, though he doubted its use against whatever watched from the shadows. Sarah Callahan, a wildlife biologist with the Forest Service, arrived for her monthly survey, her truck kicking up dust along the access road. "The wildlife's taken a vacation," Matthew said, forcing a smile as he descended the tower steps to greet her. Sarah, her face weathered by years in the field, frowned slightly, pulling a tablet from her backpack. "What do you mean? Fewer birds, almost no squirrels, even the insects are scarce," he explained, his voice betraying a hint of unease. Sarah's tablet confirmed his observations. Bird calls down 60%. Insect activity halved, a statistical anomaly that set her brow furrowing. "Could be a predator moving through," she mused. "But this avoidance is unusual. Animals don't abandon areas this completely." Her data echoed David's notes. Wildlife decline, an unnatural quiet. Matthew pulled the logbook from its drawer, finding entries on silent forests and strange howls. The parallels were too precise to ignore, a pattern that tugged at the edges of his rational mind. That night, the howling returned, so close it rattled the windows, whispering "Matt," in a voice both familiar and wrong, like Amy's but twisted into something cold and ancient. Matthew recorded it, the sound chilling through his phone's speaker, a distorted cry that seemed to bypass his ears and burrow into his skull. During his morning radio check, he played it for Robert, who offered a hesitant explanation. "Mountain lion. Maybe. They make odd noises during mating season." Matthew's frustration flared. "This isn't any mountain lion I've ever heard." Robert's tone hardened, a warning beneath his words. "Isolation plays tricks, Anderson. Focus on your duties. If you need a supply run, I can arrange it." Matthew declined, unwilling to admit how deeply the sound had shaken him. He tucked David's logbook beneath a stack of maps. Its pages a siren call he resisted by throwing himself into routine. But the forest's silence grew heavier, its absence of life a pressure that followed him from dawn to dusk. August brought a heat wave, the forest dry as tinder, its pines brittle under a merciless sun. Fire danger signs across the region screamed red, their warnings a constant weight on Matthew's shoulders. He reported 2 small fires, watching through binoculars as helicopters doused them with water, their blades a distant hum against the valley's echo. But his eyes strayed to the tree line, scanning for movement that wasn't there, his focus split between duty and dread. One morning, as he descended the tower for a ground check, he froze. On the lowest steps, for parallel grooves marred the hardwood, half an inch deep, carved with surgical precision. The wood was pale where it had been torn, the edges splintered but fresh, oozing sap like blood. No squirrel or raccoon could do this. The strength required was immense, the intent unmistakable. Matthew photographed them, his phone's flash glinting off the raw wood, each image a piece of evidence in a puzzle he feared to solve. His personal log, kept separate from the official record, grew. Dates of howling, wildlife absence, the scratches, each entry a breadcrumb in a trail leading to darkness. David's journal became a nightly obsession, its pages a map of a descent Matthew now recognized. He traced David's entries, finding patterns that mirrored his own. August 7th, 2022. No prey birds over East Valley. The quiet at night is complete. No insects, no nocturnal calls. Sleep hard to come by. Matthew mapped his own incidents. Howling, eyes, scratches. On a Forest Service topographic map, its grid lines a fragile defense against the unknown. The events formed a circle around the tower, tightening over weeks, just as David's had, a noose drawing closer with each night. One night, the howling came from below, vibrating the floorboards, calling Matt with chilling clarity, as if the forest itself had learned his name. Matthew sat by the radio, rifle in hand, its cold steel a poor comfort against the silence that followed. He began talking to himself, a habit born of isolation. "Check the coordinates again," he muttered, stirring a pot of beans on the stove. "Southeast quadrant's too quiet." His voice answered, slightly deeper, "Probably nothing, same as yesterday." The dialogue startled him, a sign of a mind seeking company where none existed. A storm hit in early August, lightning fracturing the sky like cracks in reality. During a flash, Matthew saw it. A tall, thin figure at the forest edge, unmoved by the wind that bent pines double. Its silhouette was wrong, limbs too long, head too narrow, as if drawn by a hand unfamiliar with human form. The spotlight showed nothing, its beams swallowed by the rain. Days later, it returned under moonlight, standing still, its proportions distorted through binoculars. Matthew didn't light it up, dreading what he'd see. A face, perhaps, or the absence of one. It stood until dawn, then vanished without a trace. Sarah's August visit brought fleeting relief, her Forest Service truck a lifeline to the world beyond the tower. "The wildlife decline's worse," she said, showing a map on her tablet, a circular void around the tower where no animal activity registered. "It's not just reduced activity, it's avoidance, like they're fleeing something." Matthew nearly confessed. The figure, the howling, David's journal, but her concern. "You look tense, Matthew, not sleeping well," silenced him. He couldn't risk sounding like David, a man dismissed as broken by isolation. Sarah left, promising to return in September, her truck's dust trail a fading hope. That night, two figures appeared, one stepping into the clearing with a jerky, frame-skipping motion, as if reality stuttered in its presence. It stopped 30 yards from the tower, its companion remaining at the tree line, both watching with an eerie stillness. They stood until dawn, leaving no tracks, their absence as unsettling as their presence. By September, Matthew was a shadow of himself, surviving on catnaps in the wooden chair, rifle across his lap. The figures appeared nightly, sometimes 7, encircling the tower like sentinels of a forgotten god. He hid his notes under his mattress, fearing Robert's scrutiny, their pages a litany of dread. Times, locations, movements, a desperate attempt to find a pattern. Dreams of David stretched, smiling face haunted him, whispering words he couldn't grasp, their edges sharp as knives. On September 7th, the howling came from all directions, 5 voices weaving his name. "Join us, Matthew. Become hunger." The sound wasn't just sound. It was a pressure, a violation, pushing into his mind like a blade. The figures moved into the clearing, stopping at the tower's base, their silhouettes a perfect circle. Then one climbed, its steps creaking with unnatural rhythm. Matthew saw it clearly. A skeletal frame draped in a torn Forest Service uniform, pale skin taut over sharp bones, claw-like fingers gripping the wood. Its face was David Wilson's, but wrong. Eyes too wide, mouth too large, teeth in jagged rows that gleamed under moonlight. "I'm David," it said, voice like crushed leaves, dry and ancient. "I tried to warn you." Matthew fired a warning shot into the air, the crack echoing across the valley. "You're not David." The thing laughed, its howl a mirror to the summer's torment, a sound that twisted from animal to something that knew his fears. "The Wendigo gets inside you," it whispered. "It's patient. It has all the time in the world." Matthew fired again, the bullet striking its chest. It fell, a dark, thick stain spreading where it landed, reeking of cold rot, like meat forgotten in snow. The trail led into the forest, droplets glinting in his flashlight's beam, but ended at a fallen log, the silence absolute. Cracks surrounded him, unseen things circling, their movements a rustle just beyond sight. He fled to the tower, barricading the door with the fridge, its metal scraping the floor, and blocked the north windows with the desk, its legs screeching in protest. Dawn brought a chorus of howls, his name woven into screams, fading as the sun rose. He radioed Robert, reporting a trespasser and a warning shot, omitting the creatures in human form, the dark blood, the voice that knew his name. Robert promised rangers, delayed by wildfires in the next county. "Do not engage," he ordered. "Lock yourself in and radio immediately." Matthew agreed, knowing he'd already crossed that line. The figures returned at dusk, 7 watching silently, their stillness a threat louder than any howl. 2 days later, a helicopter appeared, its rotors a distant thump. Matthew rushed to the window, hope surging, help at last. But through binoculars, he saw it circle 2 miles east, over the site where David's tent was found, its Forest Service logo glinting. He fired flares, their red arcs burning against the sky, but the chopper didn't turn, its pilot blind to his desperation. It vanished west, taking hope with it. The figures remained, unmoved, their circle unbroken. On September 12th, the figures climbed again, their steps creaking in unison, a synchronized assault that shook the tower's frame. Matthew locked himself in the bathroom, the only room without windows, its 4 walls a frail fortress. He checked his rifle, 28 rounds, not enough, and opened his journal, hand trembling as he wrote, "Final log entry, September 12th. My name is Matthew Anderson, fire lookout at Copper Mountain. If you're reading this, I'm gone. The Wendigo is real. Took David Wilson last year, and now it's come for me. Burn this tower. Burn the forest if you have to. Don't let anyone else come here alone. The Wendigo is patient. It will wait." Voices whispered through the door, David's cracked and dry, a child's high and wrong, a deep growl that vibrated his bones. "Let us in, Matthew. It's easier if you don't fight. The hunger isn't so bad once you accept it." The words weren't spoken. They were felt, a pressure in his skull, promising relief in surrender, agony in resistance. The door splintered, cracks spiderwebbing the wood, each impact a heartbeat counting down. Matthew's supplies were gone, his stomach a knot of hunger that mirrored the thing outside. He hadn't slept in days, his body sustained by adrenaline and fear. The radio, his last link to the world, offered only static, its silence a betrayal. He tried one final call. "Base, this is Copper Mountain. Emergency. Do you copy?" Nothing. The scratching grew insistent, with groaning under unseen claws. "Matthew," David's voice whispered, "we've been waiting since last summer, since David told us about you, the next lookout, the next feast." The door shuddered, its frame cracking visibly. Matthew made his choice. He wouldn't become like David, a thing of hunger stalking the woods, its howl luring the next soul to this cursed post. He placed the rifle's barrel under his chin, hand steady, a calm washing over him like the storm's rain months ago. The door shattered, and David's distorted face appeared, stretched too tight over sharp bones, smiling with too many teeth. "Too late, Matthew," it whispered, eyes glinting with hunger. "We're already inside you." Matthew closed his eyes and squeezed the trigger. Copper Mountain Fire Lookout stands empty, its windows dark, its planks creaking in the wind. Inside, David Wilson's logbook lies open, its pages curling, beside Matthew Anderson's journal, its final entry stained with blood. A rifle rests on the floor, its barrel cold, a single bullet spent. The forest is silent, but not of life. Something stirs in the shadows, its howl a silent promise, patient and eternal, waiting for the next soul to climb the tower's steps. The Grand Tetons stretch endlessly, their peaks hiding secrets older than stone. The Wendigo's hunger lingers, a void that devours light and sound, its call a whisper in the silence. Will another lookout come, drawn by duty or despair? Will they heed the warnings, or succumb to the hunger that watches? Could you endure 6 months in that tower, hearing your name woven into the night's howl? Would you trust your senses when the forest fell silent, or doubt them as madness? Could you face the thing that watches, knowing it knows your fears? If you found the journal, would you stay to burn the tower, or flee before the hunger found you?